Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing Severance by Ling. Our mutual aid that we are fundraising for right now is for Hakeem. If you'd like to learn more about Hakeem's story, check out the baseoregon.org link that it's going to be in the description. He was a firefighter here in Southern Oregon and was a victim of a race-based hate crime. Essentially, like, he was defending himself against his racist coworker and is now serving like 5 years in prison. So there is a fund for Hakeem that you can go to and donate, or if you'd like to learn more about what exactly is happening with him and updates, just go check out Base Oregon and see more information there. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host, Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host, Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms. Okay.
There we go. Sorry, the intro. We have been tinkering with it. We're changing things up so it doesn't feel as monotonous as before because we aren't doing our normal thing. We're trying to change it up. So if anyone has any mutual aid suggestions to, like,
That
feel
you
free.
need us to shout
let us
out,
know.
please message us. We will have any of that stuff. All of our DMs are always open, so if you ever need anything for us to like shout out or anything like that, we are very open line communication with anybody that wants to read out with us.
Basically why the last couple times it's been we were fundraising a little bit for the Eastern Kentucky floods, which if you haven't seen, like, there's a ton of flooding.
Yeah,
I've been getting it on my TikTok For You page. Yeah, there's even more flooding because of all of the tornadoes, and then
Yes.
shit's just getting crazy
Rain and everything,
everywhere.
severe weather. Yeah. But
Yeah, if it's not weather, it is late stage capitalism and the unveiling of fascism and the further decaying and declining into something. It could be even new in it itself. Fascism is like that, which is kind of perfect because our book that we are reviewing today is a post-apocalyptic story. It's a very revered, I suppose would be the way to say it. It is always recommended. I see
it's
it
kind
constantly.
of like one of the new book talk darlings, even though this came out in 2018, I think. Is that it? You don't
I
have it
believe
on
so.
here,
I think it did.
but
I know I'm slacking. It did come out in 2018. I have the Goodreads open. I think it was like May something.
A couple years before COVID, which is a really interesting fact that a lot of this is written before COVID, which, like, I feel like as Marxists, it's not necessarily surprising because, like, it's always like Marxists and like tankies having like the burden of being right all the time, where it just takes a couple years for something to happen, for it to be proven that we can already predict these things, because Marxists tend to look more at the past and critique the past and view that. And so, like, the way that this book works, I think it is able to predict what the United States would do in the midst of a pandemic and what they actually did. And we can now, like, compare and contrast that with this fictional book that came out 2 years before one of the worst global pandemics in modern times.
And a lot of the times while reading this, I feel like it could be very triggering. I have, like, talked to some people who have said that when they were reading this during COVID, it was very eerie. It was a lot to handle. And even now, COVID is not over, but it's interesting to see some of the things that happen in this story that are kind of similar to what is happening now. But if you don't know what this book is about, it follows our main character, Candace Chen. She works in this Manhattan office tower, and she works in, like, publishing, where she sells Bibles.
She's not really publishing
Right.
Bibles. She's just like, she works with companies that are trying to sell Bibles to make like unique Bibles to sell, and she does like the manufacturing process, where she's like the middleman between the
Yeah, so it's like
publisher.
it's in the publishing, like, sphere, but it's not like she's picking books. She's finding different ways of, like, making, like, the Owl Crate type, Like the
She's like,
different publication
yeah,
special editions, getting things for different people with different needs or whatnot. Like that's what she's doing. It's at very interesting jobs. I'm sure it really does exist.
yeah.
But then Shin fever spreads, and it's this
I feel
fatal.
like you shouldn't say anything about the disease if you haven't read it. Like, you kind of.
You haven't read. I'm not going to explain all of it, but it is like it's a disease that is going around, and it's her going through this while also reflecting on her life and everything that has led up until this moment. So
It's
it's a
very.
very interesting
It's got a
coming of age
non-linear.
story or coming of old adult. Sorry, not coming of old, coming of adulthood tale. That's what it
Well, because
says.
it's got a very much like non-linear storytelling, so you're kind of getting like the before the disease infection has really like hit on a large scale, and then you're also like the aftermath of it being on a large scale. So kind of you get like best of both worlds, but it is very eerie sometimes about the stuff that is referenced and mentioned within this, and you're like, oh, I remember that sort of thing.
I know this song,
Yeah.
but it really is interesting. And Ling Ma, this is her debut novel, I believe, that got published.
What you said?
She had some other things. Apparently, Ling Ma used to be a fact checker at Playboy. I thought that was a really interesting fact. Now she is
What do you
a
mean fact
professor.
checker for Playboy? Like for the
So
articles that people don't read?
yeah, like Playboy magazine is like a proper magazine where they cover like other
Well,
things
yes, but
in
who's
society. If you've
reading
never
those?
read a play, hey, when I was 18, the first thing I did when I turned 18 is I bought a Playboy magazine, and it was the Butts edition because I didn't know what to do going in there. I was also pregnant, so it was just like, well, I guess I'm gonna get this because I'd never read one. They're all like closed up, and when you go into like any store, do you remember like going into grocery stores and like any of the adult like Hustler, like it wouldn't even be like anything. There was was it the swimsuit like Sports Unlimited? They always put like covers over adult magazines in the grocery store.
I never cared about magazines enough, to be honest.
Oh, I was okay. Magazines were okay. We're showing our fucking generations right here.
I
Anyways,
mean, like,
magazines were a
I
really big
read like
part of like the millennial experience.
J14 whenever I was in like
That's
elementary
how I got my
school.
Jonas Brothers pictures
But
and
I
shit.
didn't like
Zac
reading the
Efron.
magazines. I just like getting the posters out of them, and then I wasn't even allowed to hang up the posters on my wall. So like it was like completely pointless for me to have a magazine for real.
Well, well, never mind about my tangent with the. I just thought it was like a crazy thing to like have that as like your job. Like I don't know exactly what she ended up doing to get to that point, but I did read that. Then while she was doing her MFA, Master's of Fine Arts degree, she wrote a short chapter of Severance before it was called Severance, and it got some awards. And then she ended up turning it into a full blown novel.
Oh, that's
That was
interesting.
my understanding of
So it
what
was like
happened
a
because she had
short
like this idea.
story at
Yeah,
first.
I think it was following. I don't know if it was the past or the present. I didn't read it, so I don't know a whole lot.
Well, we read
But
the
she
book,
also
but
has
not that
another
chapter
book
that she
too.
published. Yeah, that's short
Um,
stories, a short story
it's yeah, it's
collection.
like something Bliss. It has like oranges, and it looks like it's like
Bliss
covered in
montage.
cellophane. That's right, Bliss montage. I don't know what that's about. I don't know what it's rated, but Severance is the one. There's only 2 books.
And
Severance is the
apparently
one that
she's
everyone
working on
talks about.
another one right now, according to this. She's completing a book manuscript tentatively titled Mortal Labor, Abortion, Childbirth, and Everyday Crisis in 20th Century China.
This was okay, I got really in depth in Ling Ma, and I found her .edu, and this was on her professor website thing that it gives you like a little blurb if
Yeah.
you like look up your professors on like the whatever college or university they're at. So that's what it said.
Readmyteacher.org. What's her
I did
rating
not
on
look at
there?
the. I don't even know. Because if before she was an assistant professor, and now I think she is a proper professor, but that was in like the last year, so I don't know if she has a proper rate my professor. But I don't think we're gonna get into that for for the purposes of this episode, this book is very high regarded. It's been nominated for a lot of different awards. It was nominated for the Locust. It was awarded the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award in 2019. It got the Kirkus Prize for Fiction in 2018. It was a Goodreads Choice Award nominee for science fiction. There's a ton. I'm not going to read them all off. You can look at the Goodreads. You can see them all if you want to read them. I'm still trying to figure out what all these awards are and where they came from. So hopefully in the coming episodes, I will have that more dialed in because this happens every single time, and we've been doing this for like 2 years. So
I only know like
gonna figure it
Goodreads
out.
Choice Awards, and then I think like Hugo Awards are like for fantasy stuff. That's all I know,
That sounds right.
pretty much. And then like of course like there's like the Newbery, which I think is like kids books or something.
Some of the like cash prizes, so I don't know how things get nominated or if people like just submit their own books to these things.
I
I don't
think it
know.
depends on the whoever's doing the awards, because I'm pretty sure for Hugo like anybody can apply to be like to nominate books. But don't quote me on that.
The more you know.
Yeah.
So I was trying to get into that what exactly Ling Ma's politics were, and I didn't have anything concrete. There's not a lot about her on the internet. I didn't see any controversies or politics. So if there is, at the point of filming this, this is April 14th of 2025. If anything has happened that
At the
we're
time
not
you're
responsible
listening to
for what we say,
this, and
we're
we're
putting a fair warning in there. Anyways, the intention for writing this, per an NPR article, was that she wanted to show the effects of global capitalism more visibly, and she thought that by using like a zombie allegory and like a disease or whatever, however you want to view this story. Some people view it as like zombie apocalypse, some people just view it as like a general disease, but the disease is something that inflicts the world in some way, which capitalism is a blight on the land. And
yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with that comparison. Well done.
Yes.
I can absolutely see it.
Well, because I
But
guess we haven't
this
really
is where we're gonna end our spoiler-free review
review.
real quick, because Kristen and I have not discussed this. This is something we both have finished today. Um, our thoughts.
I think, well, okay. So I don't know how like you were pitched this, because like obviously like Mariah has not watched the show Severance, right? Which this is not based on the show Severance at all. The TV show has no connection to this book at all, correct? But right after, like, whenever Severance was getting popular around season 2, everybody is like, oh, this is stuff you should read if you love the show Severance. And there's been a few other books on there, like Never Let Me Go, I think is a book, or The Center. And this is another one that popped up a lot too, was Severance. And I know a lot of people get it confused that it's related to the show. It's not related to the show. I was like, I love the show Severance. I ate that shit up. Every Thursday night at 9 p.m., my ass was in my chair and I was watching that live. I watched season 1 of Severance back whenever it came out, and I had to wait 3 years off of that cliffhanger. So I was in the trenches for a Severance fan. And so I saw this and I was like, okay, I really like Severance. Everyone's saying if you like Severance, you should read this book. So I was like, let me read this book. I was like, Mariah, we should plan to read this book at some point, blah, blah, blah. And I just want to say, if you like the show Severance, I don't think you're going to like this book, because they're not comparable in any way. Like, Severance is like a 6-star TV show. This book is lackluster. It is very, like, mid, unfortunately.
To me, feels like you can tell that it is a debut novel, and I think like the politics of this book,
The politics are
they're
great.
great.
Yeah.
But it's the pacing of this story, and I
Mhm.
wasn't the biggest fan of Candace's characterization. I felt she kind of was lackluster. I think I still would recommend like people read it, because anything that has to do with like immigrant experience, like
Mhm.
diversifying your reading,
Yeah.
like this is good, and like the overarching message. I think if perhaps if you are somebody that doesn't read a lot of nonfiction, or not just like plugged into the IV that is like politics 24/7, like I read a lot of nonfiction and shit. So like some of this wasn't
Groundbreaking.
Yeah, I think it could be for some people. For me,
Yes.
it wasn't. I do think we're gonna have a good, robust conversation because I have some ideas to explore in this. But when this was pitched as a like, what was it?
Anti-capitalist, it makes it seem like it's supposed to be like a Babel-esque, and like if you've listened to the podcast, you know, like me and Mariah love Babel. We ate that shit up. And like that's like our standard for like a 6-star read. And this is kind of like the way that it was pitched, like politically at least, is that like it's a great critique on capitalism. And it's like so crazy because it came out 2 years before COVID got like started at all, and so then you're like kind of like looking at this like lens of like the future through the past. And in reality, you just get kind of like a boring main character that has like nothing happening to her. Like she's the one that like reacts to everything around her without her actually actively doing anything. And I know for like me personally, whenever I'm reading a story, I prefer something where the main character is not so passive. I want a very active main character.
And part of me wonders if that was supposed to be intentional, but I just didn't think it worked for what this was pitched as because like on the back of the book it says that what somebody giant it's like one of the biggest blurbs on the back that says the best work of fiction I've ever read about the millennial condition, the alienation and cruelty that comes with being a functional person under advanced global capitalism, and the compromised pleasures and
Incredulous.
no, it says irreducibly personal meaning to be found in claiming some stability in a terrible world. Sorry, it's very light gray. I could barely read that.
I mean,
I
I'm
don't.
not a millennial, so also with that aspect, but I don't think that it leans too much into like millennial core of anything. I don't think. It's just like the way that like because you're following Candace as like the main character, and it's kind of written in the way that like Night Bitch is written where like there's no quotation marks or anything like that. So it feels almost very stream of conscious too, which can work.
It's just a very. It's different for what it. I don't know. I and like the ratings also kind of confuse me. It has like an average of 3.9 stars, 118,000 ratings with 17,000 reviews. So it has a fairly high rating, right? And I can't figure out how. I don't think it's a I don't think it's a 5-star book. Like I've
No.
been trying to look at this from every angle and I maybe I'm just not the demographic. Maybe
I
this
feel
is
like
for
if you
older
like watching
millennials.
paint dry, maybe it's a 5-star book, but like in
Oh, and
general,
it hurts. It hurts because there's just so much here that I liked, but the way it's executed really
well,
frustrates me.
well,
Because it's written kind of like The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, like with this dual timelines that you have going
yeah,
on,
I can kind
which
of
I
see
enjoy.
that.
I like that. I thought that that was like
I
cool and unique, but
I didn't really have
it
anything
just didn't
against it,
work.
but it was just like that it was like there would be times where like I did not care about reading about the past like before. Like it would be more interesting to see how you're adapting and changing to the way that society is now. Like we have like a whole new thing. Like can only need so much build up to what this is, you know? And I feel like there's some twists in it that I just felt like were cheap in ways that we can talk about once we get into the spoiler zone too, that I just felt like weren't relevant to the character. Like they were relevant, I guess, but not in a way that you wanted it to be meaningful, where it could actually be meaningful. And the ending is so flat for me too.
And we both rated it very similarly. I think I gave it 3.25 and
I
Kristen gave it 3.
Yeah, I just gave it a straight 3 because I don't know if I've rated anything else 3 stars, but I know I did like it more than The Dispossessed for sure, which is what I think I rated that like 2.5 stars or something. But I didn't like it more than like anything else, you know? Like it wasn't like it doesn't like it's not it's fine. That's like the overall thing. Like I think it's fine. If you're looking for something that is like critiquing capitalism lightly. I don't think it really gets its teeth into like a good critique of capitalism. It's like very surface level, I think. Or if you're even somebody who just like likes very, very much like a character based story that has like a specifically like unlikable main character, because I don't think Candace is supposed to be likable. Because if she is, I feel like Ling Ma did a terrible job at portraying that because she's such like a nothing
She's
character
She is very
almost.
passive, and probably we're going to end up, like, segueing into the spoilers, so
Mhm.
just prefacing that, because I don't think there's anything else we can say without, like, completely
Spoiling.
spoiling the story, and I'm not going into the reviews, 'cause I looked through some of the one-star reviews, and there wasn't really anything. People were just saying it was, like, slow or boring. It which I can agree to an extent, like, right? Um,
Well, that's one thing
but
too, is, like, it's less than 300 pages, and the fact that, like, me and you, we started reading it, what, at the beginning of April, and we just now finished it today, the day of recording, when normally we can at least finish a book at least a few days before recording. But neither of us had really any draw to keep going back to this. Like, we started it at the beginning of April, and I ended up reading most of the chunk of it this weekend because we had to end up recording this episode rather than me, like, wanting to pick it up too.
and Chris and I are pretty fast readers, I would say.
Yeah.
Our average pace is above average, so,
Yeah.
the fact that it took so long and it just felt very dragged out, it was kind of frustrating in that respect. So, like, the structure of the story, I think just didn't work for me. The themes worked. I think
Yes.
it's just the structure. Honestly, like, that's, like, what's killing me here is everything else about this I liked, and I was just really
And
sad
I'm not, like,
that it
saying like, I
wasn't.
feel like we'll definitely read more of, like, Ling Ma's work. Like, I'm not turned off from her at all to, like, "I'm never reading a book by her again," sort of thing, you know? It's just, like, I just wish it was a little bit different and maybe if it sunk its teeth more into that, and we can end up going into why we specifically disliked it, because 'cause I'm sure most of the reasons why we disliked it, we probably can't really critique much without spoiling it specifically. So, official spoiler zone,
Chloe!
I would say.
So I typed up notes in our little doc because I was going through like my head trying to organize like the pros and cons of this.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you have the same ones. I really liked the immigrant storyline. I don't talk about this very much, but my aunt is a Korean immigrant. I have worked with immigrants my whole life. I worked on an orchard. I work in healthcare. Most of my like immigrants are some of the hardest working people that like it's beyond what I am physically capable of. It's an incredible thing. So seeing her parents and how like their struggles with assimilating and doing away with a lot of with their culture in the pursuit of like the American dream. I've
Mhm.
seen it so often. So I think it was very touching and seeing all of like the nuances to the I honestly think the parents' characters were way more built up
Yes.
than Candace's. I was the mom.
I thought
I
she was,
love the mother.
yeah, she was a such an interesting character too, because I really enjoyed how, like, because I feel like at least, like, whenever you're reading a lot more of, like, specifically, like, immigrants that move here from, like, Cuba or China, like, from communist regimes and stuff like that, you get so much of, like, the not them necessarily hating where they're from, but then them criticizing all of, like, China and criticizing all of Cuba and then becoming staunch, like, conservatives in a way. But I feel like with the way that Candace's mother's character was, she still very much loved China and she wanted to be back there. She loved China so much and she loved her family there and all of that stuff. And I thought that was a really touching, like, and realistic thing, because I feel like in media, especially because like everyone is driving for that American dream and like you have to throw away all of what was before to like build yourself up in America, to you have to like assimilate into like that perfect American sort of idea. I like that she was somebody that was like, I don't want that and I'm not going to do that.
Even her small acts of protest against her husband, which he just ended up shutting down. It's like, "You're not
Yeah.
going back, we're not going back. We'll go visit occasionally, but, like, you're never going back." He had to turn to consumerism to end up easing and abetting her homelessness or homesickness.
Yeah.
Sorry, so he's taking her shopping to the supermarkets, and, like, American supermarkets are, like, a thing because, we have
There's
so
so
many different
much.
options.
Yeah.
There really isn't. It's a lie. It's a lie.
Yeah.
They're all owned by, like, the same people.
Like,
It's all the same shit.
you go to the store and look at the wall of toothpaste. How many of those toothpastes are owned by the same, like, Johnson& and Johnson or P&G or whatever? Like, all of those, like, they'll have, like, multiple different brands of the same thing, packaged differently, made in a different factory, but in reality, it's all the same stuff, you know? Which is why, like, so many people, I think, are drawn to, like, store brands now, like, generic brand is what it's called, because there's no real difference.
It's the illusion of choice
Yes.
that we are sold here in the States. And I feel like a lot of people, like, people
And we
here
we
don't know, so, like,
yeah.
why would anyone else know
We
that,
I
like,
mean,
these there's big
we
parent
do
companies.
have luxuries too, though, compared to other parts of the world where, like, that she talked about, like, getting a gallon of milk is, like, a thing, like, that's different there than is here, is because we are, like, exploiting hundreds of other countries to make sure that we have, like, the freshest produce and the freshest milk and the freshest whatever, and then all of it, more than half of it, ends up going to waste anyways.
Yeah, like, this our what do we wanna our I was not ambiance. You know, our richness here in the States, right,
Mhm.
is it's rooted in imperialism. Like,
Yes.
it's coming from somewhere. So I can only, like, imagine, like, living somewhere where you are subjected to poverty and
Mhm.
you don't have access to things and just wanting things so you can, like,
Had the
be
bare
comfortable.
minimum,
That's
yeah.
a very normal human experience and very valid. But
Yes.
that will not be resolved by moving to the imperial core, unfortunately, and I know a lot of people do end up, like, realizing this, and I do think to an extent our characters in this story are also kinda realizing this. We meet Jonathan, and Jonathan is Candace's boyfriend,
Yes.
partner. They were neighbors and whatnot, and he kind of just ends up quitting because he's able to pick up on a lot of what's happening, and he's like, "I don't wanna be part of this system. I'm not gonna participate in the meritocracy." And Candace has been so socialized into believing, which is it seems per the end of the book, by Ling Ma, that this is a very normal experience for a lot of immigrant children, is these imposed things that you need to work this hard to be this person to, like, be accepted into society. And this is not something that is really imposed on white people. Like, sure, we're,
Yeah.
like, affected by meritocracy and whatnot, but not to the degree that a lot of immigrants are. So Candace is in this really weird predicament of being told that she has to do this thing and, like, go to school and
Get a good
climb the
job,
corporate
yeah.
ladder, and her, like,
Be
white
better than
boy
her
is he
father.
white?
I
Is
don't
Jonathan white?
I don't know because she did say his penis was
Oh,
brown.
that okay.
So,
That's what I don't know what
we just know he's
Jonathan's
an
race is.
American for sure, and I feel like it's kind of implied that he's white at least. That's
That's
kind of
what
what
I
I got,
gathered.
but, like, it's not like she was like, "He's white, blah, blah, blah." Which, like, the thing is that I feel like Jonathan's critiques are valid of society, like, obviously, you know what I'm saying? Because, like, he very much is so like us, but then it's also like you have to be able to meet people where they're at, and not everybody can just afford to only do freelancing to afford their rent and stuff like that. And he's somebody who's like, I don't want to have to do it all. And not everybody has that privilege to do things like that.
He gives, like, white person in Oregon, "I'm gonna go live in a commune" type.
Yeah.
Like, he fits the Portland stereotype, "I'm gonna go join, like, the polycule and I escape society." Like, it's very much escapism, like, what he
Yeah.
does and the way he, like, goes through jobs and does things where he's not really, like, participating in the system. He's not exploiting anyone. Like,
Yeah.
he just does odd jobs and kind of flies by the seat of his pants, so to speak.
And if that's what
And
somebody
that's
wants to
not
do, that's what somebody wants
well,
to
that's
do,
not what
but
Candace wants to
that's not
do.
what Candace wants to do. And so, and I do think, like, because it is very unrealistic to what upset me so much about, like, Candace's characterization and stuff is because, like, she was so passive as a character too that, like, Jonathan never even got to know that, like, he had a child on the way or anything, which could have, like, really ended up humanizing him or forcing him to like want to settle down or something. You know what I'm saying? Because some people do end up changing once they realize that there's more to life than just like them doing whatever, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know if that is part of it as well because the resounding theme throughout this is severance.
Yeah.
I very much like that is why the story is Severance, which I thought was a really cool like literary theme to have. The main character's family being severed from their homeland, the main character and her partner, and then also as like the Shen fever starts to go around, she's further alien. It's like there's just all of this alienation that starts happening, and it starts to manifest itself. We see with the Occupy Wall Street, like the tensions are high in this storyline. It's not just
Yeah.
a fever, but also there is real world events that are like compiling. And I thought that was really interesting to have like those class antagonisms that were made apparent, that there is like this dichotomy being formed that
Mhm.
is causing this alienation. And I even thought like the Shin fever itself, as it affected the peoples who were affected, where they were cut off from their reality and they just kept performing these tasks over and over again, like they're
Yeah.
just like a slave system without thinking, without eating, like they're the perfect laborer, so to
Yeah.
speak. I thought
Well,
that was really
because I
interesting.
thought it was
I'm frustrated that the story couldn't have been more than what it was.
no, because I thought it too was a really interesting theme too, because like you have this idea of them rinsing and repeating their menial task over and over again. Like you have that scene where that lady keeps setting the table and her family pretends to eat and then they pick up the dishes and then they set it down and they do that over and over and over again. But then you also see the parallels of that within Candace where she talks about like her life before Shin fever like outbreak was and how she would just get up for work, go to work, come home from work, get up for work, go to get home from work, get up for work, and like about how like she's virtually in the same system as well. But then I think the idea of severance, I feel like the problem is with this messaging too, how like it almost like is like, well, if you just like go off on your own one day, like you could be okay, sort of thing. Because like you have with like Candace falling pregnant and then her deciding to leave the group that she was into originally with, where I'm like, the idea of you being by yourself in some type of situation like this is so like you need to work like one thing that like me and Mariah like advocate for all the time is like building community or working with people around you and things like that. And even though like Candace did not necessarily have like the greatest relationship with necessarily everyone around her in that group, she still did have real connections with some of the people. And you can't just like throw that away to hopefully maybe find some other group of people in this world that you don't even know if there's people surviving, you know?
Was that supposed to be the satire? Like you go through as a reader watching an individual do seemingly individualistic tasks because of a society that forces individualism. And when you liberate yourself from this arbitrary authority figure, Bob, um, rather than trying to work within that little small dynamic that was supposed to be like horizontally organized and like having resources
Mhm.
distributed just to leave. It was a very interesting. Still can't figure out what the satire is. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm reading this wrong. Why is everyone saying it's a satire? What is it a satire of?
I don't
It,
know. That's what I'm
what
saying. It felt very realistic to me. Like it didn't feel like any extremities. Like no like you know what I'm saying? Like especially with us dealing with COVID and things like that. They're like, "Oh, like everyone like stopped going to work eventually." Like is it because she kept deciding to go to work and like the idea that like people will still be that extreme to like keep working for their capitalistic overlords for a crumb of
Maybe it's because
profits?
we're not like post COVID or anything. Because again, it's still
Yeah.
going on, but the way the society is functioning, where like they're not publishing death tolls from COVID anymore, which is like what happens in the book.
Yeah.
Um, it I guess I thought like the satire it was gonna be more like Dungeon Crawler Carl. It like a more like humorous satire or something. I don't know. I was expecting something or a little bit more of an overt theme because the other themes in this are very clear to pick up on, like with the politics and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm not
Where is the
sure.
satire? I'm just a little confused because I remember I was looking. I was like, it's a satirical. It's like The Office meets whatever zombie
It's
apocalypse.
nothing
I
like
was
The
like, I'm.
Office, like because like The Office is like a satire on like office work and like office societies and like the
And
way
it's
that like the
dry
community of
humor,
yes.
right? So where's
But I mean
the
satire
dry
doesn't
humor?
necessarily have to be humorful, I guess, but I think typically it is because you look at things like The Onion or Family Guy or South Park, which those are satires because they make something that is like seemingly normal in most people's eyes and they take it to the very far extreme of whatever, which I guess this is like the very far extreme of like a worldwide pandemic, which is like yes, but it's also because it becomes like a zombie apocalypse sort of thing and so many people do end up dying that makes it so extreme, but I don't think that necessarily makes it a satire.
Perhaps it's with Bob being like this authority figure and taking them to a facility, and it's a Mall of America.
I thought it
I
was
don't know.
really interesting. Well, it's not Mall of Americas because Mall in America
I know,
is
but in
like
my head,
in
I was
somewhere
like,
else.
it's a giant mall.
But like the idea to me is that like it was really interesting about how like the themes of the Shin fever attacking those with like nostalgia and people that look back on their past fondly and things like that because you have Ashley or whatever where she's like seemingly not fevered at all until she goes back to her childhood home and then she gets the fever and the same thing with Bob in the ending where he doesn't really have any signs of the fever either until he's like washed over with this wave of nostalgia for the mall and how he grew up there or whatever, and that he ultimately gets the fever. And I don't know if maybe like the ending, because like the ending of her, like maybe ending up getting nostalgia for Chicago and like her connection with Jonathan. And then I don't know if that maybe sort of implies that like maybe she'll get the fever there, sort of thing. And it's because the ending is so open ended, where like it could be like, oh, she ended up finding other survivors, but I feel like that's so unlikely.
I know, like, nostalgia core, I guess we could call it, is a very pertinent thing for millennials.
Yes.
That's why there's, like, Vine compilations, there's you see them on TikTok all the time, high school in 2000, I don't know, 2008, 2012, whatever. There'll be these, like it has, like, the soft, I don't know, rock background. They're the same shit, and people are like, "Oh my god, times were better." But I feel like everyone does that. I don't know that's a
Yeah, like
inherently millennial thing.
that's what I'm saying. Like I don't think like obviously like since I'm Gen Z, so I guess I have like I'm technically like older Gen Z or whatever. But like you can see it now even with like Gen Z, like people my age are still playing Roblox. They're still playing Club Penguin. They're still playing Toontown. You know, like these things have been like even though they've been taken offline by like the corporations that were originally funding them, they're all back up except for Roblox, I guess. But like they're all back up under like fan made servers of younger people that played those games when they were younger and they still play those. Or just like the same thing with like Roblox, like why you have like adults still playing Roblox now. Like I don't think that it's necessarily that and the idea that like looking back on your past fondly or being happy of the life that you lived before you had to deal with responsibilities and like burdens of capitalism on your life. I don't think like making that like, oh, you'll get sick from that and like blah blah blah, where like obviously people are gonna have rose tinted glasses for their past and the life that they live now because of life sucks living in late stage capitalism. It sucks so fucking bad. You scare me.
Bug. I heard it
But
buzz. Sorry, we had the doors open today. I know what you mean though. It makes it seem in this story that nostalgia and being fixated on something that was or that should be is what's hindering progression. And I don't I don't agree. Unless you're like a Reaganomics. you
Unless it's
know,
like
make
all you
America great again, like you're trying to go back in that sense, but that's just a very reactionary way of looking at
and I
life, and
don't
I
think
just didn't
millennials are doing that
extract that from
either.
this.
That's the thing is that like I don't think that's like a millennial like mindset. That's like Gen X boomer sort of thing where I feel like the I think what millennials and Gen Z yearn for is a life without the extreme responsibility where none of these days we can afford rent anymore. We can't afford car payments anymore. We can barely afford groceries anymore. People are getting into relationships just so they can have someone else take on half the rent with them. Like having nostalgia for like, oh, I missed a time when people could afford buying homes. That's not like necessarily a bad thing to be looking for look for in your life because like whenever like you look at your parents or I look at my parents like they were able to buy their homes for a reasonable price and able to like get decent jobs where they don't necessarily have to be like making top dollar being the highest ranked person to have a livable wage. And I do think that's like something that people like obviously will be nostalgic for because there's nothing to be happy with right now, really. Like, there is, but you're never gonna be happy about it in that moment. You're only going to be happy about it whenever you look into the future, or, like, whenever you're in the future looking back on your past, I think.
Perhaps that's what I don't know, the theme was, is just you have to free yourself or something of these
Feels too much like
arbitrary
Jonathan
chains
then,
we're applying to ourselves. It does feel like Jonathan.
which is supposed to
I
be
don't
a
know how to
critique
feel
of
about any of that.
Jonathan in a way, which I don't think Jonathan was, like, the worst person in the world either. I think he with what he lived with and like he saw the fever getting bad and things like that and he didn't want to live in New York. He couldn't reasonably afford New York with what he wanted to do. And he wanted Candace to come with him where I feel like the thing is that like I wish like love was more of a theme within this because I feel like love was not much of a theme in this and I feel like love is so important and like community and being around people that make you feel good about yourself and that you want to be with are so important as well. Instead, you get like this singular person who like does not want anything to do with anybody around them, just like reacts to things that happens to them. It's just like a very sad life, which I mean like I guess if that's supposed to say that's how most people are living or now, but the people then that would
I
be
mean,
drawn to this
she
book won't read it.
essentially worked until the fever was so beyond what could be combated just so that she could get this bonus, right?
And
She's
she
working in
couldn't
the
even use
city.
it because society is
Yeah.
no more. There's
There's
no
no which
money.
I did appreciate. There was a line towards the end. It's like, did you hear about the tower crane that fell on a group of pedestrians the other day? The city is crumbling because there's no labor infrastructure to maintain it. I did appreciate towards the end how essential human labor and
Is
how people act. And then the who was it? The 911 person, Candace gets stuck in the
yeah, the
elevator.
elevator.
It's like, where's your supervisor? They're not there. Like,
Yeah.
if she's talking
It's
to
like
people,
why are
like they're
you
not there. They left. They were the first to leave. And during the COVID pandemic, they were also
the first to
the
work from
people that
home.
were not working from home, COVID strong.
Yeah.
But then they were making people like on the front lines get sick and die, and no one has health insurance and that shit. So maybe that's but I just don't see the satire. People were saying it's comedic, and I'm just not seeing it.
Where
And
I
the
just
more I
feel
think
like
about
it's
it, the
too
more I'm just confused.
realistic for it to be a satire. Like there's no extremities of
At
it.
this point in
Like
society, like
there's people like this. This is not a satire. I think it was I like that one scene too. Well, because like there was like a scene or whatever where I don't know if it was a 911 operator or something, but she was talking to someone and they were like, "You need to go be with your loved ones now. Like that's all you have." Like that. Oh, it was the Balthazar,
Balastar.
whatever
Yeah,
his name is.
Balthazar.
Um, which I think it's so interesting that like the person that like lives in China, you know what I'm saying? Like he's talking about how like his daughter has succumbed to the fever or whatever, and he's like, I like respect you, and what I think you should do is be spending it with the people that you love. And like Candace saying that she has like acting as if she has no one to love is so frustrating because like there's obviously people around her that loved her and wanted to give her love, but she just like was not accepting of that for whatever reason. And then now she's
She
gonna
was just unaccepting or incapable of it. I don't know because, like, on one hand, either she's oblivious and she doesn't wanna put in that work and it kinda makes her like an asshole, or she's just so damaged that she can't accept it and makes it sad.
well, because like
Again,
it keeps going
this
on too
is
because
not
you
funny, it's sad.
like because there's the scene where Delilah and I can't remember the other girl, like one of the last people that are working with her, and then they're
Blythe.
like, yes, and then they're like, we're going to Connecticut. We're getting a car, the last car Enterprise has, and we're renting it. We're going to Connecticut. You should come with us. And she's like, no. And then the same thing basically happens again whenever like that's like basically her second like denial to somebody who's like reaching an empathetic hand out to her after Jonathan basically did that to her. They did that to her. And then again with what's their faces whenever they were like going out, Janelle and all of them and stuff like that. Like they were like, oh, we might leave, blah blah blah. And the only time she was able to like accept somewhat help because she was like, oh, I would leave with them if they offered for me to leave with them. It was then. But like it had to be like the end of the world where she had no other options to turn to because you even see like her individualistic choices too whenever the cab driver or whatever was driving the cab and then he ultimately got the fever and she finds him driving and then she like throws him out of the car and takes the car from him and she's like I still don't know if maybe he was still somewhat there sort of thing.
Was a real one because Eddie was like, "I'm so happy to be in the city driving around because all the white people left."
Yeah, real. But then like the fact is that like and I don't even know like I feel like the idea is that like maybe like the shin fever is never actually like contagious in the first place because like it couldn't spread from people to people is just like the situation on whether or not your mind was succumbing to it was based on whatever you were around, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, the actual fever itself as a like
Disease.
transmutable disease
Yeah.
kind of didn't really make any sense, but I held on. I was like, It's okay. I'm willing to look past it." But it was kind of an essential thing because it didn't really make sense why they had to go about doing things or clearing things out when they're doing their
The
walkthroughs and
stalks.
the stalks. They're stalking.
Yeah, because like they didn't
Yeah,
kill the
it was
people
weird.
immediately. And like it was really interesting to me too that like Candace was almost like so against like having the families killed whenever they were doing this stuff, but then she was also like perfectly fine with it. Like perfectly fine with letting these people like essentially suffer and rot with like I don't get it. I don't know.
This is one of those rare occasions where Kristen and I are on the same
I feel
page,
like you've been saying that a lot
but
these past few episodes
I
though.
know. So we have not had a very good luck of the draw the last couple of books that we've read. This is the third one
Annoying.
where we read
Well, no.
Eileen and it didn't hit. We
Yeah.
read The Maid, it didn't hit.
Yeah.
We read this, it didn't hit. So hopefully whatever we have next actually
Wishes.
serves. So yeah, this is also probably the end of the episode. I don't have
Yeah.
anything else to say. I mean,
I
the
don't have anything
politics of
else.
this book, there's stuff there, and I really hope that whatever comes out next
I feel like the
is going to
people
eat.
that need to read this would not read it either, and I feel like because like we're principled Marxists in a way, like we're very solid in our ideas, which is why it's not so. Like I feel like if I read this like whenever I was in high school or probably in 2018 whenever this came out, I'd be like, oh my god, this is life changing. You know what I'm saying? Back whenever you don't have that political knowledge and also like living through like such late stage capitalism and like living like these experiences that we have with like current presidency and things like that, where it's not able to hit as much as like maybe it would of in the past. But then see, look, that's me being nostalgic of the past for me to want this book to be better. So then is that problematic? According to Candace?
I
Um,
don't know.
anyways, but yeah, I think I'm pretty much done. I don't really have much else to say. But next episode is Shark Heart by Emily
Someone.
something. I think her name's Emily
Yeah.
something.
This is not a book club read. Also, this was a book club read, so if you wanted to read along with us,
On
Emily
Fable.
Habrick wrote Sharkheart.
Yeah.
Feel free to join us on Fable. We're voting on our book right now. It's between
Blood Over
Blood
Brain.
Over Brighthaven and Piranesi or whatever.
Piranesi.
Piranesi.
Yes. Those are the two that are in the top. So if you really want to read one of those books with us, go vote in the poll.
Honestly, I think
Honestly, it
regardless of
might
what
be done
happens,
by the
I
time
could
this
end up
episode's up.
reading both of them,
Yeah.
and they'll be posted at some point because they both seem interested. We don't know a lot about either. We're going into them very blind. I know
As blind as
very
possible.
little because I think that's the best way. Because sometimes
Yeah.
even in the descriptions, there's just too much describing happening in the little
Usually
summaries that I don't.
usually how I get most of my recs is like TikTok, where it'll be like, you should read this if you like blah 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 or whatever. And someone like, if I follow someone, they're like, you should read this. And I'm like, okay. But I feel like I'm very good. I don't know if it's like compartmentalizing or whatever. But like somebody tells me about a book, I can like forget everything they ever said about it too. Because like Newly Nova talked about Shark Heart in one of her videos or whatever because she loved it or whatever. And I was like, okay, I need to read that. And whatever she said about it, I don't really remember. All I know is about some dude that's turning into a shark. And it's sad. Imagine if the love of your life turned into a shark. Would you still love me if I was a shark, Mariah?
You love me if I was a worm. I asked my partner that, and the answer was no. So
Well, I don't think Tyler would love me if I was a worm either. Actually, he probably would, because then I'd be quiet. Anyways, so join us in a few weeks reading Shark Heart, and then also join the book club. Follow us on our various social media platforms linked below. Other than that, thank you and good night.